Hello. Welcome back to the channel. Today we will studying Boyhood Days of Class 8 Oxford Book. So what this chapter says about? Let us read paragraph by paragraph. After the coming of freedom, there were 2 points upon which practically all people agreed that they must change their names and they must leave the old plantation for at least a few days or weeks in order that they might really feel sure that they were free. So, what does the first para says to us? It says that the Afro Americans living in America attained freedom, and there were 2 points on which all the Afro American agreed that they must change their names and leave their old plantation. Plantation means the old old place that they were living on. They must shift to a new place for a few weeks in order to feel that yes, I am free. Now, the colored people felt that it was far from proper for for them to bear the surname of their former owners. This was one of the signs of freedom. When they were slaves, a colored person was simply called John or Susan. If John or Susan belonged to a white man by the name of Hatcher, sometimes he was called John Hatcher or often as Hatcher's John. But there was a feeling that this did not denote a free man. And so, in many cases, John Hatcher was changed to John S. Lincoln, the initial S standing for no name. So second para says to us about the name of the Afro Americans. So when they were enslaved, if a person is John or Susan, and they work for a white man named Hatcher, they may be called John Hatcher or Hatcher's John. But this was did not denote a free man. That means that they were not feeling free, that we are not free keeping John Hatcher or Hatcher's John as a name. So they changed their name into John S. Lincoln. S meaning no name. And Lincoln, they developed a surname on their own. Most of the colored people left the old plantation for a short while at least, to try their freedom on to see how it felt. So the second para says to us that most of the colored means black people, left their old plantation for a short while, as we discussed in para 1, so to feel free and to see how it felt. My stepfather did not belong to same owners as did my mother, and as soon as freedom was declared, he sent for my mother to come to Kanawha Valley in West Virginia. This journey from Virginia to West Virginia was rather a tedious and a painful undertaking. What a little clothing and few household goods we had were placed in a cart, but the children walked the greater portion of the distance, which was several hundred miles. It took us several weeks, and most of the time we slept in the open air and did our thing over a log of fire out of doors. Finally, we reached our destination, a little town called Maldo. So the boy or the narrator has a stepfather whose owner was not the same as his mother. As soon as the freedom was declared, he sent for his mother to come to Kanawha Valley. So he sent a message to boy's mother to come and live in Kanawha Valley, that is in West Virginia. The journey from Virginia to West Virginia was a painful and a tedious one. Means there were a lot of sufferings the boy, his brother, and the mother made. There were very few clothes and a little household goods, and they placed in a cart, but they had to walk a lot of hundreds of miles to reach their destination. They slept in the open air, they cooked their food out of the doors, this, and it was and they had and finally they reached their destination called Malden. Marlin was right in the midst of salt furnaces. My stepfather had already secured a job at a salt furnace, and he had also secured a little cabin for us to live in. Our new house was worse than the one we had left on the old plantation in Virginia. At a poor plantation cabin, we were at all times sure of pure air. Our new was in the midst of cluster of cabins crowded together with no sanitary regulation. The filth of cabin was intolerable. Our neighbors were colored people. Quarrels and fights were frequent. Though I was a mere child, my stepfather put me and my brother at work in one of the firms. So, Marlin was a small town in the midst of salt furnaces, means factories that make salt. So, his stepfather already got a job at the furnace, and he also had a little cabin, that means a little home for them to live in. Now, the narrator describes his home was worse than the one they had in Virginia, as they slept in open air. There was open air, there was free air, pure air, but here it was filled, no sanitary regulations. The neighbors were colored people also. They quarrel and fight it, and he described that they were not very good living in West Virginia as compared to Virginia. Though the narrator and his brother was small children, his stepfather put them to work. The first thing I ever learned in the way of book knowledge was while working in the salt furnace. Each salt packer had his barrels marked with a certain number. The number allotted to my stepfather was 18. At close of day's work, the boss of packers would come around and put 18 on each of our barrels, and soon I learned to recognize that figure, though I knew nothing about any other figure or letters. So, while working in the salt furnace, he got his first bookish knowledge. Bookish knowledge means that first thing that is mostly in the books. Like we study English, math, science. That's the bookish knowledge we have, not the common knowledge. So while he was working in the salt furnaces, every person, every worker there had a number to how many barrels they packed of salt. So his stepfather's number was 18. So he started to recognize that figure 18, though he could only recognize, not say or speak it, as he did not have any other bookish knowledge. And that's what he says in this para. I recall that I had an intense longing to read, to learn to read. I determined if I accomplish nothing else in my life, nothing else in my life would in some way to get education to enable me to read newspapers. My so I induced my mother to get hold of a book for me. In some way, she procured an old copy of Webster's Blue Black spelling book, which was contained which contained the alphabet, followed by such meaningless words as ab, ba, ka, da. I began at once to devour this book. I tried in all the ways I could think to learn it, all without a teacher. In a few weeks, I mastered the greater portion of the book. In all my efforts to learn to read, my mother shared fully my ambition, though she did not read or write. So, in this paragraph, as we can see from here, the narrator is talking about that he wanted to study, he wanted to read and write. He was determined. And because his family was illiterate and they were poor, he was not able to go to school, and there were no children schools for black people at that point of time also. So He told his mother that he has an intense longing to read, and she bought procured means she bought a book of Webster's Blueback spelling book. This was a book of this was a book, alphabet book, that has A, B, C, D, and such meaningless words like you can see here, Aaka, Da. I began once to devour this book. Devour, as you can see here, read quickly and eagerly. Means he was so eager to learn that he started reading it all the time. And in a few weeks, he mastered the greater portion of the alphabet. That means he just learned. He did not know how to spell it. He just remembered the figure, what is this and what is that. He also appreciated his mother that she fully shared his ambitions, though she could not read or write. That means she was illiterate, but she was supporting her son so that he can study. About this time, the question of having some kind of a school for the colored children began to discuss by the members of the race, as it would be the first school for Negro children in that part of Virginia. Uh, it was it was to be a great event, and the discussion excited the wildest interest. The most perplexing question was where to find the teacher. In the midst of discussion about teacher, a young colored man who had been a soldier found his way into the town. Each family agreed to pay a certain amount per month with the understanding that spend a day with the teacher will spend a day with each family. This was not bad for the teacher, for each family tried to provide their very best on the day the teachers to be its guest. I recall that I looked forward with an anxious appetite to the teacher's day at our little cabin. So the narrator talks about is that about the time the discussions for black schools, and Negro means the Nigerian, the people who belong to Nigeria, that's in Africa. So for them to build up a school, the understanding of school was there, but the main problem is they had no teacher. One day, a man from a man from Africa arrived, and he was learned, and he decided to teach them, but only a condition was there that each family has to pay a certain amount per month, that the teacher will spend a day with each family. Means he will spend a day with each family, teach their children, and family would provide their best to serve the teacher with food and all the necessary things. The narrators called it a teacher's day. So what did he do? He also, there were up around 30, 40 children, 30 children at that time. So the teacher goes one day in a month to each children. Now, this experience of a whole race beginning to go to school for the first time presents one of the most interesting studies in the development of any race, as it was a whole race trying to go to school. Few were, few were too young and none too old to make attempt to learn. Not only were the day schools filled, but the night school as well. The great ambition of older people was to try to learn the Bible before they died. With this end in the view, men and women would often be found in the night school. So what here in this para, the narrator says that the children were increasing, and so were not the children, the member were increasing, as he says that we can see few were too old, few were not too old, because age nowadays we have school for children that are 18, we can say from 4 to 17 or 18 years, 4 or 5 to 17 or 18 years. So here they were school because it was the first time They did not care about the age, but all wanted to learn. As you can see, he told old people wanted to read Bible before they die, and the young people or the children were there. Their mission was to study as hard as they can, so that they can uh, be successful in their remaining life. This is what that this para says. It also says that not only day schools were filled, but the night school as well. So there were many people, and if there are day school and night school as well, so there must be more teachers also. So there were both day and night schools were filled. So this talk about the great ambition of older people and all the people who want to study. Next para, next para says, the opening of the school, however, brought me one of the keenest disappointment that I have ever experienced. I had been working in a salt furnace for several months, and my stepfather had discovered that I had a financial value. So, so when the school opened, he decided that he could not spare me for my work. The decision seemed to cloud my every ambition. However, I was determined to learn something new anyway. In this para, the narrator says that the narrator says that he had one disappointment after the schools opened. That he had been working in the salt furnace or sorry, salt factory for many months now, and his stepfather recognized that his child has a financial value. Financial value is he is hard working at his work, and he has a lot of concentration at his work. But what was the disappointment of the child that he could not father, so that's why father could not spare him to school. Spare means father could not allow him to go to school, as he wanted him to study and earn money for the financial situation to be increased in the family. However, I was determined to learn something new, something anyway. But the child was very keen to learn and determined to learn. So he said, however, no matter what, I'm determined to learn something new anyway. After a while, I succeeded in making arrangement with the teacher to give me some lessons at night. These night lessons were so welcome that I think I learned more at night than the other children during the day. But my boyish heart was still set upon going to the day school, and I let no opportunity slip to push my case. Finally, I was permitted to go to school in the day, with the understanding that I was to rise early in the morning and work in the furnace till 9 o'clock, and return immediately after the school was closed in the afternoon for at least 2 more hours of work. So what did the narrator explain that he made the arrangements with the teacher to go to night school. Now, as we saw that there were night school and day schools as well, he made arrangements to go to night school, but children like me, they had to make friends, and their boyish heart told him to go to day school to interact with other children rather than the old people coming in the night school. He he was permitted to go in the day school. Finally, he asked his father again and again, and he permitted him to go to the day school, but with a condition that he had to rise up early in the morning and work till 9 o'clock, and return immediately after the school in the afternoon for at least a couple hour of and 2 more hours of work. So he had a condition that he has to work before the school and after the school as well. So no break in between. He woke up in the morning, did work, went to school, and did work again. The schoolhouse was some distance away from the furnace, and and as I had to work till 9 o'clock, and the school opened at 9, I found myself in the difficulty. School would always begin before I reached it. To get around this difficulty, I yielded to a temptation. There was a large clock in the little office in the furnace. On this clock, all the 100 or more workmen depend to regulate their hour of work. To reach school, I moved the clock hand from 8:30 to 9 o'clock mark. This I did each day till the furnace boss discovered that something was wrong with and locked the clock in a case. I did not mean to cause inconvenience to anybody. I simply meant to reach the schoolhouse in time. Uh, to regulate time, he had one more problem that his father told him to work till 9 o'clock, but he had to reach school at 9 o'clock. Whenever he reached school, he would be late half an hour. He would be half an hour late. So what to he decided a little trick. There was a large clock in the little room of the boss in the salt factory. So he changed the time of the he changed the time of the clock by half an hour, on which many people depend to regulate their hours of work, as they will get wages or payments as how many hours did they work per day. So he did that, and but one day the boss found something wrong with the clock and he locked it in the case. He told that he did not mean to cause inconvenience to the boss. He simply went to reach school in the time. Now now there was another problem. Now in the next para we will learn another problem by him, a problem of him. At school for the first time, I was confronted with two other difficulties in the first place. I found that all the other children wore hat or caps on their head. I neither had hat or cap. When I saw how the other boys were dressed, I began to feel quite uncomfortable. So, so let us read this para again. At school for the first time, I was confronted with two other difficulties. In the first place, I found that all other children wore hat or caps on their head, and I had neither hat or cap. When I saw how other boys were dressed, I began to feel quite uncomfortable. As usual, I put the case before my mother, and she explained to me that she had no money with her which to buy a store hat, but she found a way to help me out of the difficulty. She got two pieces of homespun jeans and sewed them together, and I was soon a proud possessor of my first hat. So in this para, the narrator tells that uh, when he goes to school, the other children there wore hat or caps on their head. But because he was quite poor, he neither had a hat or a cap. So he asked his mother, and his mother had two jeans. His mother said that she has no money, but she has two homespun jeans, and she sewed them together to form a little hat. And the narrator says, and I was soon the possessor of my first cat. So he was very happy that he got his first cat. I always felt proud that my mother had strength of character enough not to let into temptation. She refused to go into debt for that which she did not have money to pay for. So here he say that her mother did not try to unnecessarily waste money, as they were very poor and wanted, and but she also wanted to give his child what he wanted. So this was a little thing that she did for her child. My second difficulty was with regard to my name. I always been called Booker. It had never occurred to me that it was needful to have an additional name. When I heard the school roll call, I noticed that all of the children had at least two names. I was in deep perplexity because I knew that the teacher would demand of me for at least two names. By the time the occasion came for enrolling of my name, an idea occurred to me. When the teacher asked me what was my full name, I calmly told him Booker Washington, as if I had been called that name all my life. Later in my life, I found that my mother My mother had given me the name of Booker Taliaferro soon after I was born. And as soon as I found out, I revived it and made my full name Booker Taliaferro Washington. I think there are not many men in our country who are privileged of naming themselves in such a way that I have. So narrator speaks that his second problem was his name. He had been called Booker of all his life, and when he was enrolling in the school, the teacher asked everyone for two names, and all gave them two names. Like we discussed on the first page about the names of the Afro Americans, he had not named himself that way, as he always been called Booker, Booker, Booker. So when the teacher asked his full name, he calmly told Booker Washington, as if he had been called all of his life by that name. But as soon as he realized that his mother has named him Booker Taliaferro, he soon changed it into Booker Taliaferro Washington. Years ago, and he also talks about that there is not many men in our country, and there are not many people who are privileged to name themselves the way he had. Years ago, I resolved that because I had no ancestry myself, I would leave a record of which my children would be proud. The world should not pass judgment upon the Negro too quickly or too harshly. The Negro boy had obstacles, discouragements, and temptation to battle with that with that are little known to these notes suited as. While when a white boy undertakes a task, it is taken for granted that he will succeed. On the other hand, people are usually surprised when a Negro boy does not fail. In a word, the Negro youth starts out with the presumption against him, adapted and taken from slavery. So in the last part of this story, he talks about that people should not judge, people should not discriminate or differentiate between white and Negroes, because when a white man undertakes a task, people think that he will succeed for sure. But if a Negro succeeds, people will surprise and people would be surprised by seeing this. But the boy says there's no need for surprise, as the Negro is the future of America. This story was adapted from the book, from the autobiography of Booker T. Washington, that's name is Up from Slavery. Thank you, guys. Thank you for watching this video. Please like, share, and subscribe, and turn those notifications on. This is a presentation by Adhin Club. Thank you. See you next. Goodbye. Thank you very much.